Okay, so this week I'd like to talk about life after lockdown. We don't know how far away that is, we don't know when that's going to happen, but it's important to start considering it. A few things that have really been on my mind this week are the widening gaps. Now those are within education, so for example you've got the children who've been at home and have been pretty much hot-housed, you know, they've had every opportunity. There's all these wonderful resources online, there's all these YouTube things to watch, they've got parents who have got loads of books, loads of resources, loads of time, loads of patience, and they will have had the most incredibly enriching education. There are those who have nothing. There are those who are at home with parents who maybe have special educational needs, or who are at home and looking after so many other people and things. It could be that they're carers for elderly relatives, or carers for, they've got younger siblings for the children that they have to look after, and they don't have the time and the resources and the energy, and sometimes not the wherewithal, to actually really support their children educationally. And then you've got everything in between. There'll be people who have seen this as a remarkable opportunity to forget the curriculum as such and really look at a project maybe in great detail, all sorts of everything in between, as I say. There's also that gap within the workplace. So for example, there's a lot of people who are just totally bored, you know, adults who are like, I've got all this time on my hand, and some are either, you know, maybe using it for learning a new skill, and you know, oh, I'll access this exercise regime, or there's a life skill drawing, I'm going to have a go at that, or whatever. Still life drawing, that's it. But there's also people whose work is actually busier than ever. You've got the obvious frontline people, you've got people like obviously those in the NHS, social workers, people in supermarkets who are, you know, keeping those going for us. They're busier than ever because they've got reduced staff and they've got bigger shifts, you know, there's more work for them. Also people like me, you know, I do a lot of my work online, and therefore the internet forums that I'm part of discussion groups on are busier than ever. So whereas I used to sort of maybe reply to 3 or 4 things a day, I'll be replying to 20 or 30 things a day at least, you know. So, and people who are doing online working, some of them got more time to do their assessments, so I'm doing more and more formative marking, so my workload's gone up. So all these people talk about, oh, getting so bored, there's nothing to do. I'm thinking, phew, I'm busier than ever, you know. And so there's everything in between. You've got the ones who have got loads of time, the ones who've got no time, the ones who've got their same income coming in, and the ones who've got no income coming in. So the gaps in society are widening, and not just in the ones you might expect. There'll be people who have been successful in their own businesses who suddenly go bust. So the people who have and who have not, the people who are busy, the people who are not, the people who are being well home educated, the people who are not. Those gaps are widening, and there's, you know, it's like a spectrum, it's everything in between. That being in mind, I'm having a meeting, haven't got a date yet, but it's being set up with Daniel Nugent's Head of Research at Ofsted, because I wanted to discuss what education will look like after lockdown, and I don't know what that will be. The discussion hasn't yet taken place, but I have got ideas. I always try to see things as opportunities, and whilst this has been a time of tragedy and a time of difficulty, it can also be seen as a time of opportunity, because we are being forced to rethink. Now, when we're forced to rethink, in a time like this where there's crisis, it's also our values get realigned. So we're not just rethinking practical things, but also what matters. And values conversations are something which came up a lot in my doctoral thesis, a lot of my research, and they matter. And values matter to all of us. And what I found is that for teachers, when they felt disconnected from their values, that really impacted on their mental health as teachers. So we need to rethink loads. What does society need? What does education mean now? Because it may not mean your GCSE grades followed by your A-levels, followed, or IB, whichever you're doing, followed by your degree, etc., etc., academic route. Who is it we're valuing at the moment in society? What skills are we seeing that society needs to cope? And there are the obvious ones, the medical skills, the scientific brains, the practical things though as well. People who can make things can make a huge difference. So we also need the right mindsets. If we are teaching children how to pass exams so that they can do more exams and they can learn how to pass those exams, are we giving them the skills they need to cope when things don't go to plan? Things are not going to plan at the moment. So we need to create, and there has been a lot of talk about this before this current situation, but it was sort of secondary, in the background, underpinning some of what we do, but really we still need to teach children how to pass exams and spoon feed them so they can pass exams. But now we're realising that we need people with the right mindsets, people who see a problem as a challenge to find a solution rather than something to just go down into despair over. We need people who have resilience, who can cope when things go wrong and realise that going wrong is an opportunity to see there are other possible ways to approach things. We need people who have got the ability to come up with creative solutions. Now we need creative solutions. We need those open mind thinkers at the moment to get us through what's going on. We also, as I've said in several conversations and blogs and things, we need the arts. You know, we need that boost. A lot of the creativity comes from people who are in those creative fields, the musicians, the artists, the poets, the writers. They are people who can come up with creative ideas. There are people who are used to being on television and doing their bit, and they're thinking, well, what can I do now? And they're coming up with creative ideas. You know, we're seeing different formats for things. The V-Day celebrations was beautifully presented, but it had to be done in a different creative format. So we need that resilience and those creative solutions and flexible mindsets. We need that flexibility in our thinking to move forwards. So flexibility in our thinking, maybe that also means flexibility in our schooling. There are children, up until now, if you take your child out of school for a week, you get fined. Parents get fined. But actually that might be what that child needs at that time in order to engage better with education. We might need flexible schooling in that way that allows people to come in and out. There will be a lot of challenges in that. How does a teacher cope with, well, they were there last week, they're not there this week. So do we then become more facilitators as teachers? Not I tell you, you do, but I help you learn how to do it for yourself. We need to think about that. We can learn a lot from the primary sector. The primary sector is mixed ability, very mixed ability in most classes. So there has to be that flexibility of, I'm coping with a child who can't read, a child who's already reading Dickens, and everything in between. How am I going to work that? How's that going to manage within my classroom? So let's think about primary teaching strategies and how we can employ them in secondary schools. As I say, it's about learning also from lockdown. So we've learned that children need regular breaks. We've learned that children also need that time to go deeper. Time to really, if they're engaged in something, to not have to just leave it because the bell's gone, you've got to go to the next lesson. What about, actually, there's an opportunity to stay with it, because that's where your mind is at the moment. It's not necessarily the most easy to sort out practically, but with the people around us with creative solutions and flexible thinking, we can find a way to make education something that is more relevant and more meaningful for the children and more engaging, something they can actually capture and work with. as well as the arts and creativity, we're realising the importance of the caring skills in society. The people who are visiting people, the people who are doing shopping for others, those who are just thinking of something which will help somebody else to feel needed, special, cared for. The people who help others feel that they have a purpose. Those caring skills really matter. And then some of the real practical things, you know, some of us are finding that, well, actually I could paint that for myself, and others are finding, oh my gosh, I wish I had those skills to do the practical things that need to be done at home. Even things like a haircut, you know, we've seen some of the disasters on television, we've also seen a lot of people with longer hair. So what skill sets do we value in our society, and are they the ones we valued before lockdown? We need to think about how we have changed, and do we want to go straight back to what it was like before? I was thinking today as I was in a meeting, and there were 9 of us in the meeting, and everyone was very good at listening to each other and then waiting their turn, putting their hand up and then speaking. They had to, it was on Zoom, and if we'd all tried speaking at the same time, nobody would have been heard. But we are learning that actually listening to people matters. And because a lot of us are doing things through platforms like Zoom, we are having to listen to each other because we can't all speak at the same time. We're having to be patient. We're having to wait our turn. And those are actually important skills. So maybe we can bring some of that into what we do within education once things have changed. So we need to be thinking about what we're teaching, but we also need to be thinking about how we are teaching it, so that all children of all abilities and all needs can be accommodated in a way that is truly inclusive, that is helping everyone, and that is helping us towards the society we want to create. We need to go back, we need to have that values conversation, we need to calm things down, not be in a rush to all be the ones to instigate change, but to think about what we really need, what we really mean, and what really matters for society moving forwards. Thank you.